Games that had playtests that were so bad, the game ended up getting canceled. Ready, set, go. Let's talk about Halo Online. And unless you're deeply rooted in the Halo community, you probably haven't heard of this game or don't know what it is. That's mainly because it essentially was a heavily modified version of Halo 3's multiplayer intended as a free-to-play PC game back before Halo 3 was even available on the PC for Russian audiences only. This one is actually really wild. So it was developed by Saber Interactive, who had done work on the Halo series before with like Combat Evolved Anniversary, I think, and another studio known as Innova Systems, and then they worked with 343 Industries. Originally, it was announced all the way back in March of 2015, but it went into a closed alpha test in April of 2015, and later they did a beta test and of course offered paid cosmetics that you could pay for. Now, what's interesting about this is it wasn't just a straight up PC port of Halo 3's multiplayer. Actually, if you look into it, it's a little more unique. You see, the Halo game series has used the same engine across every Halo game, essentially, just iterating new versions of it, evolving them and changing things up and adding new things to make the engine better. All the way through Halo Infinite. It's actually still essentially, the root engine that was used in Halo Combat Evolved. What's unique here is that after Halo 3's development, there was a three-way fork for development of the game. So they essentially had three engines that were split off of Halo 3's engine that they're working on. The Halo Reach one, then they had the Halo 3 ODST one, which was, less time because that game was turned around quicker. So it was more just like a big lighting overhaul. And then they had a third engine that they were working on, split from Halo 3, that would eventually be the Destiny engine. But what's unique is that Halo 3 ODST engine was kind of just never really used again, despite the fact that it was still very similar to the original Halo 3 engine, just with new lighting updates. And this engine was actually the engine that was used for Halo Online, which was just random, but interesting, right? That they chose to still use the slightly improved engine that was used in ODST that was very similar to Halo 3, and that's what we see here. And obviously it had enhancements and new iterations and stuff. Now, this game also had new maps, which I thought was really interesting because back in the day it was just Halo 3 and then that was it. But now all of a sudden there's new Halo 3 maps, and some of these are kind of cool, like Diamondback, which was like a desert version of Avalanche, and then there was Icebox, which is a remake of a Halo 2 map known as Turf, and then there were some other maps that were kind of unique and interesting. They even had this like big cutscene to try to tie in some story. Like, this thing looks expensive. I don't know how much cutscenes cost to render, but I mean, like, look at this. And then there was a ton of armor permutations added in, way more than what Halo 3 had. It followed more in line with, I think, the art style Halo 4 and maybe Halo 5 had. Not necessarily like the classic Halo 3 art style, but they were trying to like make this like a new modern experience for, I guess, the Russian audiences for Halo. So after the beta existed for a couple of months, they actually announced that they would be closing the beta down and send the game in for serious revision, I guess. And they were going to refund people who had spent money on like the premium beta testing kits or whatever. And then in 2016, there really wasn't too many updates. The studio that was in charge of running it even said that Microsoft hadn't made a decision about the project's fate, and that the fate of the project was kind of like uncertain. Then later on, it was stated that the project likely won't ever exist, and the game was, I guess, suspended indefinitely. Now, the one interesting thing about this is that later on, the files that were used here to, bring Halo 3 to PC were then picked up by a community of modders, and they decided to reverse engineer Halo 3's multiplayer into a more classic experience, and it was like a fan project called El Dorito, and it was like Halo 3 on PC for the first time before Halo 3 on PC existed. And then Microsoft swooped in and told them they had to stop development on the mod. That was kind of disappointing. I did play it back in the day when the big version 0.6 came out. There was like 12,000 people playing. There were custom game lobbies all over the place. It was a great time. Halo 3 eventually did come out in MCC, and some of the content from Halo Online did eventually make their way into MCC, which I think is kind of cool. Overall, I still think it's a really weird project to exist, period. Really weird to try to like Halo 4ify Halo 3, if that makes sense. I mean, if you just look at the aesthetic, you look at the gameplay, it definitely feels not like Halo 3, which isn't the right direction to take this in anyways. So it was probably better just to call it a day. But man, they put a lot of effort into it and a lot of, energy. So I don't know why this existed. What does SEGA, the publisher behind the Sonic the Hedgehog series, have in common with the likes of Xbox and PlayStation? Honestly, not too much nowadays, but they were working on a game that was supposed to go on Xbox and PlayStation known as Hyenas. What is this? This was a game developed by Creative Assembly, and it was supposed to be this FPS game that was like science fiction, gritty, dystopian, space pirate-y, in this creepy future where like Mars was the place to live, Earth was like destroyed or something, and the survivors live in the slums known as the Taint. And I'm not making this up. This is official lore to Hyenas. Now, the gameplay was kind of like a combination of team deathmatch and extraction shooter, I guess. And essentially, you gotta go in there and loot stuff, specifically interesting items from the 80s and 90s. Honestly, I mean, like, the theme here's at least unique. We've seen some really boring games, and I mean, I'll give them that. Even more so, this project had been in development for years, possibly starting before 2017. And while the game originally was utilizing Alien Isolation's engine, it was later switched to the Unreal Engine. And in 2019, they brought in filmmaker Neil Blomkamp to meet the development team and give feedback and ideas on how to create a good mood, you know, to focus all the creative decisions moving forward. Eventually, though, they parted ways with Blomkamp, and some sources, like Video Game Chronicle, actually said that this might have been Sega's biggest budget game ever, and they apparently claimed it themselves. Actually, there are reports that in 2021, Sega said that it would consider investing up to 100 billion yen, which is $882 million across 5 years, to achieve its super game ambitions, which would cover the development for multiple projects, but Hyenas was going to be a big receiver of some of those funds. And a few former developers did corroborate that it seemed like it was Sega's biggest budget game ever. So, what went wrong? Well, while the game was announced in June of 2022, Hyenas got a little press statement in 2023 where Sega executives actually straight up said that Hyenas development was challenging, in quotation marks. They actually did multiple closed alpha tests where they picked just like random people who had signed up to get to experience Hyenas to play the game. Like a surprisingly large number of people did get to play Hyenas who signed up and play in various different stages. Like there's enough gameplay that's, you know, drip fed out of there, because it's not like they did closed door play tests where you have to come in to play the game. Like they were just like, here's the download code, have at it. And it's interesting. Honestly, I think the concept art for the game maybe looks a little better than the actual game itself. There was a lot of potential for what they could have done with cosmetics, both good and awful. They did eventually do some public playtesting at Gamescom in 2023, but despite this, after the game's alpha tests, it appeared that Sega wasn't too happy with the game's progress, and since they were supposed to be the publisher, they were really trying to turn the ship around. They allegedly sent employees from Sega Japan to permanently relocate in the UK to get like more hands-on in the game's development here. Now, remember how we said that the Sega execs were like, yo, development is quote-unquote challenging. It also seemed like they were trying to figure out what they were going to do to get people to continue to play the game and maybe make money off of the game. So they were like, hey, maybe we need to make this game free to play or something. But in September of 2023, Sega wasn't feeling that great about it, and they actually ended up halting development and also halt development on a couple of other unannounced games that they were working, mostly due to quote-unquote lower profitability of the European region. Blame those Europeans. Damn. Now, of course, this game getting shut down did mean some fallout at the studio at Creative Assembly. There were some pretty big layoffs across the studio, even departments that had no involvement in the game itself. It was interesting, to say the least, after this game got shut down. A lot of developers and people who had worked close to the project at some point did get pretty vocal online about how just an overall failure in leadership for this game. And it seemed like behind the scenes, there was a lot of passion there and a drive to want to make a good game, but just man, it seemed like things were just falling apart leadership-wise, especially considering some of these reactions. I mean, just listen to these. I'm gonna have Luke read them to you guys.
These reactions actually come from a Video Game Chronicle article that is reporting on a video by the YouTuber Volund, who got some details from the developers. And I think the developers wanted to stay anonymous, so keep that in mind. So what went wrong? Total lack of direction. Many of the leadership asleep at the wheel, but they never seem to lose their jobs. An engine change partway through the process. Attempting to break into a saturated market and not committing to do anything adventurous with the game. I'm angry with the shit leadership and for the people above them for not dealing with them. I had hoped that maybe after Hyenas flop, we could be kept on at Creative Assembly if the next project was another nice low-risk contract like Halo Wars 2, but most of us are likely being made redundant, and I'm okay with that, really. And then also a developer talked about how Neil Blomkamp was visiting the studio, and that him actually having an idea was kind of refreshing, since leadership didn't give them any real direction. In March of 2011, Hasbro and the RuneScape developer Jagex announced a partnership to create a new online Transformers game. This game was slated for a 2012 release across North America, Europe, Latin America, and more. And at BotCon 2011, which is the official Transformers fan and collectors convention, it was announced that the game was going to be called Transformers Universe. And the more details that came out of this game, it became clear that this was going to be very ambitious for an MMO. You were going to be able to create and customize your own Transformers characters and even choose between Decepticons and Autobots, which for Transformers fans at the time was very exciting because there wasn't really a game that offered the ability to make your own Transformer. And Jagex was all in on this Transformers Universe game. In fact, they actually paused development on another MMO they had in development called Stellar Dawn, which I think also never came out, but we don't know much about that game besides some concept art. And it's also not Transformers Universe. So why is Transformers Universe in this video? Now, in 2012, it became pretty apparent that this game wasn't going to be ready for 2012. But in late December of that year, there was actually a closed beta testing that if you signed up and got in, you were able to do a short 2-hour test that features a bare-bones team deathmatch mode with a handful of pre-made Autobot and Decepticon warriors. Obviously, this was under strict NDA and the public did not see this gameplay yet. But this made people wonder, are they going back on the whole customize your own Transformer thing? And people would get the answer in March of 2013 when during a Game Informer interview, a developer stated that it would be really hard to give you like full customization for a Transformer. They also went on to state that we have customization, but the ultimate dream of creating your own custom bot from a car of your choice is a massive undertaking that doesn't really enhance the game that much. So it kind of sounds like they're going back on the whole create your own Autobot thing. But that wasn't the only thing that was changing in 2013. Throughout the year, development underwent a dramatic pivot. The first public beta was quietly halted and there wasn't any information released on Transformers Universe throughout 2013. But behind the scenes, they had decided to rework the game and not have it be an MMO anymore. Instead, they shifted towards a team-based competitive multiplayer model. And in 2014, they finally told people this, and they said that this is now a massively online tactical action game, or short, MOTA, which the CEO actually called it. And I guess this was their attempt to invent a new genre that is kind of based off the MOBA genre. But in this never before heard of MOTA game that was gonna be the first of its kind, you were gonna be able to take the role of a commander and you were directing a squad of Transformer warriors. And all of them had like different classes and different roles and abilities. And the whole MMORPG part, including the character customization, was completely gone at this point. And they would kind of explain this more in an interview with PC Gamer, where they said, Transformers are about war, they're about action. So while staying true to what Jagex is best at, pushing forward the free-to-play browser-based gaming arena, we moved away from delivering RuneScape, the Cybertron edition, and focused on upping the emphasis on action and the different skills of a collection of Transformers warriors. We have created a collaborative and competitive combat experience with deep MMO heritage, a game for today. And with all these changes, they also would switch to Unreal Engine, meaning that essentially this is the second version of Transformers Universe, with the MMO version that they tested in 2012 on their in-house engine never seeing the light of day. But by mid-2014, Jagex was finally ready to let the public experience the revamped version of Transformers Universe. They launched another closed beta that would eventually transform into an open beta in mid of 2014. From here on out, the game was kind of ran as this live beta service. They would frequently patch new content in, like new Autobots and Decepticons, slowly adding more and more content to the game. And while some of the characters you know and love, like Optimus Prime and Bumblebee, were there as like NPCs and stuff, there was a heavy focus on the characters you would actually play as being original characters. And apparently, since this was officially a partnership with Hasbro, these characters would become canon in the Transformers lore. Now, what was kind of weird is when they started introducing monetization into the game during the beta. And this led to the first massive controversy this game would actually face, because some of these founder pack tiers were, relatively normally priced, like $45, $60, even $120. I mean, there's some like collector's editions or like season pass editions that would cost as much, but they would also offer a Cyber Knight pack that was priced at $450. Now, this pack included a limited edition figurine, but holy introducing a bundle for $450 in an open beta is just something that is absolutely lunatic. And all these things would start adding up. Like, first of all, you have an MMO that was announced that isn't an MMO anymore. It's like a MOBA game now, essentially, where the MOBA genre is something that was oversaturated around this time. And then you introduced this aggressive microtransaction model. People that were looking forward to this game slowly started turning on it. Players finally had enough and they voiced their opinions, and a lot of them voiced it by not playing the game anymore, which then led to this open beta being shut down and cancelled in December of 2014, just 6 months after the launch. They would cease any development on the game immediately and shut down the servers in January of 2015. But they did give players full refunds, so I guess there was at least that. And I feel like I've yapped on enough about the absolute failure this game was, so I'm just gonna end it with a quote from Optimus Prime. I am Optimus Prime.
2014's PT, which stands for Playable Teaser for the game Silent Hills, is actually a travesty. I mean, this project looked really, really cool, and the fact that they gave players a little playable tease for the tone of the game was actually a really unique way to promote the game. It's just a shame that the game never ended up happening. And as it turns out, this game might have been even further along than what some people initially thought. While you can't download this playable teaser anymore and get to experience what it essentially was a short horror puzzle experience to get you excited for Silent Hills. However, players who've dug into the files that still had the game on their PlayStation 4 or whatever found some interesting things that were cut from the teaser, or just things that were left in the files that were probably being planned for the full Silent Hills game. Like, for instance, surprisingly, there's a lot of detail on the outside of the interior for this game, suggesting that things were really being designed beyond just this playable teaser here. Things were being implemented for the full game. And I think it's kind of interesting that you can't download this game anymore. However, we know for a fact that there's footage of people who have, modded their game to get out of the map, and they get to explore this area of a game that never stood a chance, honestly, at the end of the day. Also, there was this unused cutscene type thing going on here with this character that's headless, and it might be an alternate outcome or ending that wasn't used, but here it is, cut from the game. If you didn't know what happened to this game, Kojima Productions was developing Silent Hills, and they had Norman Reedus on board for it, but internally, there was a lot of conflicts with Konami and Kojima. Konami was pretty salty, and they were removing references to Kojima and Kojima Productions. Then there was speculation that Hideo Kojima and his team were leaving the company, and then Konami had a spokesperson say, no, it ain't happening. He's still going to be involved. And then it happened. What's interesting is how the news broke that Silent Hills was canceled. Guillermo del Toro, who was an assistant director, actually told attendees at the San Francisco Film Society the project had been canceled, and then the next day, Norman Reedus took to Twitter and he announced that the game had been canceled. So that's crazy. Then Konami announced that they were going to be removing PT from the PlayStation Store. And after all of that, Kojima reformed a new team, Kojima Productions, and they announced Death Stranding with Norman Reedus and Del Toro, but it obviously isn't Silent Hills. So rest in peace, PT.
Another MOBA on this list that was cancelled after its beta is Paragon. And I feel like we've talked about this game plenty on this channel already, so I'm gonna keep it short. But for those who don't know, Paragon was a game that was released by Epic Game. It was announced in late 2015 and was gonna be a new spin on the MOBA genre, with it being a third-person action game, when most MOBAs are top-down, or even a game like Smite is more an arcadey, one-angle type thing. So in 2016, this game would launch into paid early access, and then a few months later, it would launch into open beta that was free. And I mean, once the open beta started, it went a little bit better. They did some reworks to the map, they made it smaller, and they added new content over time. And at some point, there reportedly was 7 million registered players, but the actual active player numbers kept dropping and dropping. And by late 2017, going into 2018, one thing became apparent. Fortnite needed all the developers it could get. So Epic Games decided to pull a bunch of developers off Paragon that was already failing and put them on Fortnite duty, which then in return made the updates to Paragon slower and slower, and eventually it was announced that this game was going to be shutting down. And by the time it shut down on April 26, 2018, it had never left the beta either. And I went to Reddit to confirm that because I couldn't find conclusive information at first. So thank you for confirming there was still in beta. But yeah, Paragon initially ended here, and then Epic Games released all the assets that were estimated to be worth $17 million for free to all Unreal Engine developers, which that was a nice move, and then that spawned a bunch of of like Paragon successors. The first one was called Predecessor and is actually still around today, and the other one was called Overprime, which actually got the license right to the Paragon name, so it eventually launched as Paragon the Overprime. Paragon the Overprime would eventually shut down, leaving only Predecessor as the remaining Paragon successor. So I guess Paragon still lives on in some weird ways. The original EverQuest launched in 1999 and became one of the first truly successful 3D MMOs. It was popular enough to spawn some spin-offs for a while and even a true sequel with EverQuest 2 in 2004. But towards the end of the mid-2000s, the franchise went kind of quiet and no new releases were on the horizon. But that would change when in 2013 EverQuest Next was officially announced at Sony Online Entertainment's annual fan convention in Las Vegas. This wasn't just another sequel, this was the evolution of EverQuest, taking it to the next level. They hyped up destructible environments, dynamic AI that would respond to your actions, and a world that would permanently change depending on what the players did. And it did kind of sound like it was too ambitious to be real. And I mean, I guess it was too ambitious, otherwise it wouldn't be on this list. But before they could release EverQuest Next, they had the idea to test the tech behind it, and they released a standalone sandbox game called EverQuest Next Landmark, or later shortened to just Landmark. This game let players build, gather resources, and just test the tech that was gonna power EverQuest Next. And they did specifically say that some structures and landmarks that players would create in Landmark would make it into EverQuest Next. The closed alpha for Landmark launched in January of 2014, and the way you could get into it was by purchasing founder packs, with prices ranging from $20 up to $100, despite the promise that Landmark and EverQuest Next would be free to play eventually. The alpha would eventually turn into a beta during 2015, and there were some players that were interested in this idea of testing Landmark early and a small community built around it. But internally, behind the scenes, EverQuest Next went through multiple prototypes and scrapped builds and even reboots, with these struggles dating back to even before the announcement. So while Landmark was out and being tested by players, EverQuest Next was not progressing along. And things got way worse when in 2015, Sony Online Entertainment was sold off, including the EverQuest IP. During this transitional period, key developers were laid off, and the studio also dropped the partnership they had with Storybricks, who were creating the dynamic AI for the NPCs. And with all that, they were actually never able to get EverQuest Next out of the prototyping phase. There was never even an internal alpha for this. And because of all these struggles, in March of 2016, it was announced that the plug had been pulled on EverQuest Next. And the reason they gave was mostly that the game simply just wasn't fun. While EverQuest Next was cancelled officially, Daybreak did still try to push Landmark onto players, which by the way, Landmark was still in beta during that time. But just a few months later, they announced that you can buy Landmark as a full launch 1.0 version for $10 now. But what was weird is that this launch didn't come with any major content or any major changes. This was just a beta version with some smaller bug fixes, which were already happening during the beta anyways, and a lowered price tag, now just being sold for $10, which is half the price that the lowest founder pack tier costed. It just seemed like they were trying to squeeze a little more money out of this unfinished beta that they had. And in February of 2017, less than 8 months later, the game was officially shut down as well. And it doesn't seem like they refunded anyone, whether it's the Founders Pack members or the players who bought it for $10 later in the months leading up to its shutdown, making me think even more that this whole launch thing was more of a cash grab and not an actual launch. And that's kind of why I still think it fits this video, because they didn't really launch the game. They just said they launched the game to sell you the game again. But I mean, at least they're still updating EverQuest 1 and 2 to this day, which is actually kind of crazy thinking about that the first one came out 26 years ago.
Now, when it comes to MMOs, I always struggle to get into them. I always am really motivated to play an MMO, and then I have to do a bunch of fetch quests or something, and I lose interest fast. But the art style behind Blue Protocol looked really cool. I mean, it had this cool looking anime art style, and visually speaking, like the lighting and the colors, it looked like a really cool game. Now, this game released into a beta in Japan exclusively. Being published by Bandai Namco, it looked like a pretty cool game. It released in 2023 in the summertime for Japanese players, and I wanted to play this game because they kept delaying the Western release, and they had this huge deal with Amazon, because Amazon was like jumping into games and throwing money at stuff. So it was like kind of starting to become like a big project that was being rolled out eventually. So, you know, I've been learning Japanese a bit. I was like, I can figure this out. And I downloaded the game, I made my character, and I played a little bit. I was like, man, this art style is really cool. I have no idea what any of this says because I cannot read Japanese nearly as good as I thought I could after a couple of months of learning learning. But then I was like, you know what? I'm going to invest all my time into this. And then I found out that they were banning people for logging in if they were not in the Japanese region. And they were figuring out even who was using VPNs and banning them. And I was like, man, I don't want to invest all my time and then get banned. So I guess I'll just wait till the Western release. Nope. The game got canceled and the Japanese servers got shut down. This one was a shame because the game looked visually incredible. And it seemed like the biggest problems with the game were just the repetitive gameplay, there not being really a whole lot to do, and with player numbers dwindling and updates seemingly coming out pretty slowly, it wasn't really a huge shock that they decided to pull the plug on the game altogether. It's a shame, a game I played for 5 minutes and really wanted to play more when I could understand the language I was playing it in, never got to see its full potential. But, and this is interesting because this usually doesn't happen, despite the fact that Blue Protocol was canceled, in a way, it's actually coming back. You see, despite the fact that Amazon pulled out of the deal, obviously, with Bandai Namco shutting down the game in Japan, a Chinese studio and publisher known as Bokura actually decided to swoop in and resurrect this project. Now, this game is funded by Tencent, so, you know, Tencent has that money. As it turns out, behind the scenes during the end of Blue Protocol's life, the team had already been partnered up with Bokura, who were working on a spin-off action game that would have existed in the world, perhaps, of Blue Protocol. It was still pretty early on. However, with Blue Protocol shutting down, there was a lot of potential to still do something with Blue Protocol, and with all of those assets that have been designed, the lighting that looks great, the visuals that look awesome, and a lot of the tools that were built, the game was announced to be brought back to life, but this time around, it's being reworked as a action RPG game. So in turn, it's like a spiritual sequel called Blue Protocol Star Resonance. In some places, I think it's just going to be called Star Resonance. In other places, it will have the Blue Protocol name on it because of the fact that, people know of the game as Blue Protocol, so they got that, knowledge of the game. So while at the core, this technically, I think, is more of a new game than a game being brought back from the dead, just reusing a lot of the assets that were built, which, in my opinion, the assets and designs that were built for the original Blue Protocol were probably the best part of the game. The gameplay mechanics were where the issues were, the progression was where the issues were, microtransactions were where the issues were. So this time around, overhauling how the game functions, but maintaining the art style and reusing the things that weren't actually used could potentially be something really, really good. It's going to be doing the whole free-to-play route this time around. It's going to have gacha mechanics, undoubtedly. And I think they're also going to be making the jump into mobile devices as well as like a PC launch. So there's a lot of room for things to go wrong, but hey, at least there's hope because, man, look at this aesthetic. This is cool. I don't know.
Okay, and now we get to the third MOBA on this list that also shut down in beta. Just insane how many of these failed around like 2014 to 2016. This time, EA tried to jump on the MOBA hype train with a game called Dawngate. This was being developed by Waystone Games, a small internal studio that EA specifically founded to make this game. And when Dawngate's open beta launched, it launched into a genre already dominated by League of Legends and Dota too. And from the start, they were claiming that this would feel familiar to League of Legends or Dota players, but there would be a few twists that would redefine how you play MOBAs. And funny enough, one of their blog posts about how they're gonna evolve the MOBA genre starts off with the sentence, "So EA is making a MOBA. Why?" We get that a lot, which in hindsight just seems like everyone was trying to warn them. And these evolutions they promised, they were really just minor things like 2 lanes instead of 3. Selecting a role wasn't tied to the character, so you could customize them to fit your playstyle. But these playstyles just ended up coming down to the same things you would do in the other MOBAs. And all the other things were just minor differences in mechanics. Oh, and also they went all in creating lore for this game and published bi-weekly comics at some point. Which, I mean, that's cool, but it's not like League of Legends, for example, wasn't doing that. They were also doing a big amount of lore and world building, so it wasn't really anything new. And the actual timeline that Dawngate was playable was actually pretty short. People first heard of the game when it was leaked in early 2013 and then confirmed by EA shortly after. A few months after that, the closed beta began, and then by early 2014, they would open up the beta to everyone. And then throughout 2014, EA was trying to push this game. They did host tournaments, and they did launch the webcomics that I talked about earlier. I mean, they were giving it a good attempt to get this off the ground, but all those efforts were in vain. And in November of 2014, EA announced that they're canceling development. And this was just 8 months after the beta opened for everyone. But the game wasn't really capturing a player base, and EA themselves said that the game just wasn't progressing as they had hoped. And at this point, development on the game immediately halted, and then 3 to 4 months later, in February of 2015, the servers would also be taken offline. Players were able to get a refund though once the game closed. And Dawngate was just another failed attempt to rival League of Legends and Dota 2 from around that time. Some of those games made it out of open beta and stayed around for a little longer, and some of those just shut down, like the ones we talked about in this video. This just wasn't a good time for new MOBAs. League of Legends was at its peak, and Dota 2 had just gone full release as well. People really weren't trying to play any new MOBAs. But I mean, EA did give it a fair shot, I guess, with like a little over a year and a half of betas, counting the closed beta as well. And at the end of the day, the shutdown just seemed like a straight up business decision and nothing else. But a little interesting fact, this is not where the story of Dawngate fully stopped. There was a group of fans that formed their own studio called Studio Wayfinder, and they spent years trying to bring back the game. They were rebuilding the whole game from scratch, and they were hoping that they could license out the Dawngate IP from EA at some point. And in 2020, they even launched a Kickstarter campaign to do this, and they nearly generated $100,000. So they entered negotiations with EA to license out the IP, and then they found out that licensing the IP from EA would cost too much money. So they decided to pivot, refund everyone, drop the name Dawngate, and then just start development on Dawngate's spiritual successor with the name Dreambound. But from the website for Dreambound, it does seem like it's been in development for years, and I couldn't really find that much on it. According to the website, the game has been in volunteer development for almost 4 years, so I think at best the game might take another couple years before there's even a playable beta, if it even ever releases. And then even if it releases, I honestly don't have much hope for this, because it's not like the MOBA market changed much. When it comes to computer MOBAs, League of Legends and Dota 2 are still king. So yeah, that's the story of Dawngate, and I'm kinda tired of talking about these failed MOBAs, even though there's probably enough for us to make a standalone video on just failed MOBAs. This next one is kinda weird and actually comes from a time when games used to do gameplay demos. But in 2010, EA did a bold move, and they reprinted the NBA Live franchise to NBA Elite, and NBA Elite 11 was gonna be the first one. This wasn't just a name change though. EA was trying to convince fans that they're starting fresh, and this was the evolution of basketball in gaming. This move was clearly motivated by NBA Live losing ground to NBA 2K over the recent years. So they announced this rebranding in June at E3, and they promised a total gameplay overhaul. The big selling point they talked about was their hands-on control system. They would like change the controls to where you like flick the stick and you pull back the stick and then you let go to shoot, which they claimed gave players full control over timing, balance, and shot mechanics. So they marketed this whole thing as a more skill-based experience, like it takes more skill to play NBA Elite. That's why it's called Elite, because you're the elite gamer that's gonna throw the basketball in-game. They spent a ton on marketing. There was like plenty of NBA players in the trailers and in marketing footage that would like hype up the game or, you know, test the game themselves, give their input, I guess, stuff like that. And then in September, EA released a demo for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. And this is just when everything collapsed. People didn't like these controls, calling them unfinished and awkward feeling. The movement was stiff and the animations clipped constantly. And the in-game AI was just kind of bad and not fun to play against. And on top of that, there was a ton of glitches and the game was just very unpolished. Like, you could find videos online of players just T-posing in the middle of the court. This demo was not well received at all. And the game was set to release just a little over a month after this demo release. So then less than a week before the game's official launch, EA pulled the plug on the project. They didn't delay it, they straight up cancelled the entire thing. This was kind of a crazy move because the game was already printed and boxed and they were ready to ship it out. But in a really surprising move, EA must have read the room and decided that it's not worth the backlash of releasing this. Followed from this disaster didn't stop there though. They would skip the next year's game as well and then announce NBA Live 13, going back to the NBA Live name. And this game was a disaster once again. This didn't get a public demo, but journalists were able to play it at E3 of that year, and they already said that it was one of the worst demos they've ever played at the E3 event. And once again, shortly before launch, they would also cancel this game. Now this one wasn't as big of a deal because I guess this was supposed to be a digital-only release, so I guess they weren't sitting on a bunch of printed copies this time. But man, it's crazy to think that EA, in the same franchise, cancelled back-to-back games a week before they were supposed to launch. And the next year, NBA Live 14 would actually release, but the franchise never really recovered from this. While there was a couple of games released up until 2019, the one that was scheduled for 2019, NBA Live 20, was cancelled as well. And that was the last thing we ever heard from NBA Live. Though, I mean, 2K is getting a lot of hate online, so I wonder if, EA made a good NBA game, maybe, they could swoop back in. But the more I think about it, it's probably better they don't.
Up until a few years ago, I didn't know that Command and Conquer and Counter-Strike were two different games.
Wait, how? What?
I don't know. It's just like World of Warcraft and League of Legends.
No, that's actually funny because I thought about making a joke earlier because I talked about 3 MOBAs, about you not knowing anything about MOBAs. And I said, we can maybe make a video on all the failed MOBA games. There's like 30 of them. And then I thought let's just know anything.
I'm a console player. I don't know these games. They're PC games.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Xbox for life, boy. Okay, Command and Conquer had a canceled game in 2013. Wild story, actually, upon doing research, though. Interestingly enough, Command and Conquer has a lot of spin-offs, if you didn't know that already. There was a game called Command and Conquer Generals that came out in like 2003 or something like that. And in 2013, it was announced that a sequel called Command and Conquer Generals 2 was coming out. So that's kind of interesting. And there was a whole shakeup behind the scenes of Command and Conquer. And there was a new team brought in, and then the team was going to be under the name Bioware. But then the team that was working on it then rebranded themselves to the name of the team that had previously done Command and Conquer games. It's, if I understand that correctly, it is confusing. Nonetheless, the big problem with the Command and Conquer 2013 game was that they renamed the game from Generals 2 to just Command and Conquer and decided it was going to be repurposed as a rebooted free-to-play Command and Conquer experience with microtransactions and no single-player campaign. Players weren't too happy about the way that was being handled. And mind you, this is like 2013, right around the time where EA really started to pick up the pace with some of their shenanigans. After there was negative feedback about the whole rebrand and the free-to-play and the no campaign thing, the EA president at the time, Frank Gibeau, said that a single-player story could still be a possibility down the road. And this quote's interesting. The beauty of free-to-play is that we can adjust and adapt to what we're hearing as opposed to, I'm sorry, it's 2 months from ship and it is what it is. It's a very different model because you don't have to build as much. You build in response to your audience. Then later they revealed that they would be doing a single-player campaign, but it wouldn't be there at launch. Now, the game did go into a little bit of a playtesting phase, which was interesting. They did it at a CNC Community Summit where they let players play it there, but I believe they also did some closed beta sessions that people could jump in and play. However, the game still had a lot of negative buzz around it, especially because of the whole way that the game had been handled, the rebrand, the free-to-play with a lot of microtransactions. It was just kind of a weird thing. It being very economy-based was still, a new thing to do, and going straight in for the jugular with trying to balance the microtransactions for a game series that is beloved and a game that was supposed to essentially be a sequel to a game that hadn't had a sequel in a long time. It wasn't necessarily the best way to handle it. Visually, some people liked the game. The game was probably really close to being done before it was scrapped altogether. So ultimately, the game got canceled in October of 2013, mostly due to the negative fan feedback. The company even cited that multiplayer for Command and Conquer was its downfall, which, sure, you can blame the multiplayer if you want to, but what else can you blame? The whole game is multiplayer. There wasn't a campaign yet, so I don't know how you're like, guys, look, the multiplayer is the only reason why this game's getting canceled. That was the only thing in the game. It's just a weird statement. But there's a curveball here. You see, in 2013, after the cancellation, EA was like, don't you guys worry, because the game is still going to be developed, which definitely isn't something I expected to read looking back at this event all these years later. Matter of fact, EA said the game would still be developed, but with a brand new studio working on it, and that the customers who bought the Command & Conquer Ultimate Collection will still receive an invite to the next beta phase for the game. Then in 2014, it was revealed that EA was still looking for a development team to work on this reboot. I don't know what happened after that. Wikipedia says no information relating to the game has since been released. That would be crazy. Imagine like someone who bought that.
Gets a beta invite tomorrow.
Despite there not being a new Command & Conquer game since 2009, there was Command & Conquer Remastered Collection in 2020. And I don't think anybody who had the beta in 2013 got like early anything to it.
I actually have another EA-related failure that even relates to Bioware. Apparently, Bioware has multiple studios, one of their studios in Austin. And in 2014, they announced a 4v1 online action RPG that was gonna take you into like a Dungeons and Dragons type campaign, with one player being like the Shadow Lord, and then the 4 other players being like the heroes. And apparently, they had some closed alphas, so I mean not even closed beta, closed alphas in late 2014 going into early 2015. Just 6 months after this game was announced, they decided to cancel it. But the reason for the cancellation isn't quite clear. It seems like EA just kind of lost interest in the project after some delays and some struggles with development, so they just decided to stop right here. And I guess EA canceled a lot of projects around that time. We talked about Dawngate earlier, then the Command & Conquer thing. And now this, like, I don't know, seems like they were cost cutting a lot.
Now, EA's not the only one that did weird stuff. Xbox fell into this a few times. Fable Legends, a wild tale there, but essentially instead of Fable 4 back in the day, they had the Fable team work on a Kinect game and this action RPG game called Fable Legends, which would have released on the Xbox One. What I find really interesting is that Fable Legends was like pretty much done. There were a lot of players given access to early playtests of the game to get the game going. So the game was available more than just like a few people. Like a lot of people got in, a lot of people played it. People were spending money on microtransactions in the game. It wasn't necessarily like a super amazing game, but it definitely wasn't like something that was super janky either. Interestingly enough, Fable Legends was supposed to have an open beta. That got delayed, and then the game got canceled, so the open beta never actually happened. The game was only made on a budget of $75 million. It's up there with one of the most expensive games of all time. Where is it on this list? Hold on. It is the 3rd most expensive game to never release.
What are the other ones?
Titan Project, another Microsoft Game Studios. I think it was that MMO, the Halo MMO. That Wonder Woman game we talked about in that recent video.
That was that expensive?
Apparently 100 million. Then Fable Legends. And then a game called This Is Vegas and some other game called Volt by Hangar 13. The people did Mafia. It was just canceled like a couple years ago. I don't know what Volt was. You ever hear about that game?
Oh no, Bolt? I only know Bolt, that dog from that movie.
I wonder if it was like that RC car racing game I had as a kid. I don't remember what it was called though.
Oh, Revolt, right?
Yeah, Revolt, that's it. Real quick, Luke, I'm looking at the list of most expensive video games to develop. If you had to pick any game to wonder what the most expensive game to develop of all time was, and I was to tell you it came out in the last 5 years, what game would you think it was? And this includes reported marketing costs.
Okay, I'm gonna throw a random one out there. You remember that Roque City game? Where they hired all those celebrities?
Yeah, I do know what you're talking about, but no, it's not that game. Monopoly Go.
What?
$1 billion in marketing.
Yeah, that makes sense. They had like all these Hollywood celebrities.
Hold on. I mean, you can say all of that. That's fine. But you're forgetting the best celebrity that marketed the game. Rocket Elijah.
So is that included in the $1 billion?
I think it is, yeah.
Oh.
We're getting off track. Now, if you know anything about the Fable series, you know that Peter Molyneux, who some people suspect might be a pathological liar. I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying some people have said that in the past. He was the guy that did the whole Project Milo for the Kinect. And remember how that went. Nonetheless, there's some really interesting like internal struggles allegedly that were happening at his studio, Lionhead Studios, back in the day.
Peter Molyneux was angry. On one particularly grim day, there was another exodus. Simon and Dean Carter, the originators of Fable, had already left Lionhead in 2011 to form a new studio called Another Place Productions. And one day, Lionhead vets John McCormack, Guillaume Portes and Jérôme Texler announced that they were going to go join them. Molyneux saw red and became a furious, screaming tornado of rage, shouting at them to get out.
Molyneux soon lost it, and according to McCormack, Molyneux ordered those who were not happy to leave. And then feeling a bit sorry, he apologized for the outburst, and then in March he left to found 22 Can.
Peter would then go on to found his 3rd new company in the gaming industry, 22 Cans. Unsurprisingly though, Peter's new venture would fall prey to much of the same behavior that he was known for previously. with a sequence of scandals and false promises that would continue as a result of his presence in the media.
And then it took a couple of years, but without Peter Molyneux, it seemed like Microsoft didn't see a future in Fable and close Lionhead eventually and cancel the game altogether.
There's another Peter Molyneux project under Xbox, actually, that was also canceled. But that one, I don't know if it really counts. They showed it off as a demo at E3 2003, like behind closed doors. Like, I think you were gonna be like leading this tribe or something and then evolve with them or something. But I don't know. I guess Xbox thought it was kind of weird and then they canceled it.
Another Xbox related one that's a little bit wild and often forgotten is Project Spark. This was like this game creation platform that was going to be big on Windows and Xbox, and it was like supposed to change the world. You were going to be able to like make games and experiences and play together and create anything that your heart desired, literally.
What we gotta cut to there?
No, I just mean like I just did like prolonged eye contact. I don't know.
Okay, I thought there was like gonna be like, I don't know. Remember when people created like the hentai in Halo 3 with like the little blue spawn things?
Dude, those were the days. Now here's the thing. People had been wanting Microsoft to utilize some of their IPs for quite a while. They bought Rare, one of the most iconic IP companies from the 90s, because they had Banjo-Kazooie, Joanna Dark, they had Cameo? Like everyone knew Cameo. I guess that was an Xbox game. Nonetheless, people wanted things from Rare's IP, and we got Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts. That's not what people really wanted. We also wanted a new Conquer game, and they decided, you know what? Instead of making a new Conquer game, let's make a Conquer game in Project Spark. And they announced they were going to be essentially making a sequel to Conquer called Conquer's Big Reunion, and it was going to be built into Project Spark, and it was going to release episodically. I think they released one episode and abandoned the project.
Pretty successful reboot for Xbox, I guess. At least something got out there, you know. That's more than we get nowadays.
I don't know. This one's just weird to me. It always seemed like something that's like you get on, you play it for a few minutes, you're like, wow, this is interesting. And then you don't really want to go back because it didn't feel intentional. It felt very, very like big company that has a lot of money and just wants to show off something that potentially could be cool one day. They don't actually know how to get the game from like, wow, this could be cool one day to actually being cool one day. And I think interest fell off pretty hard. They tried to do microtransactions at the beginning, but then Microsoft's like, actually, we have a better plan for this. We're pivoting away from microtransactions and instead we're going to do something else. They discontinued the game shortly after that. So I don't know. The Conquer stuff got canceled. People were eligible for refunds based on what they paid, I guess. And the online servers shut down. You can't download the game anymore. If you had a physical copy of the game, you can still play the local contents. And if you have save files of people's creations, I think you can still play them that way. I'm looking at like extra little fun facts about it, but the music video for Linkin Park's Guilty All the Same was made using Project Spark. And you could have played it in the game back when the game servers were online. This reminds me of like when Xbox was like pushing the Kinect really hard and they like sponsored, I think it was like the iHeartRadio Music Fest. The bands had like Kinect cameras all over the place on them and they would like do weird visual effects. I think Linkin Park also played at that show. So I don't know, like Linkin Park was everywhere.
You remember, like, in the last 10 years, Amazon really wanted to start making video games and they invested in a lot of things.
Yep, we talked about it a little bit with Blue Protocol.
Yeah, exactly. And in 2016, they showed off a game called Breakaway at TwitchCon. And it was going to be like this 4v4, like, multiplayer game that is supposed to mix, like, hero shooter and sports game together, which already is, like, kind of weird. You know, I looked at footage of it and it just seems like Oddball from Halo, but, like, the game, which does not seem that fun. And they did run a closed alpha that people could sign up for. And after the closed alpha, they decided to pack it all up because the feedback was so atrocious. And later reports came out that a majority of the issue behind the scenes were that they really wanted to have this as a Twitch integrated game. And they were really trying to find a way to somehow make this like a game that profits from being watched and streamed on Twitch. I don't know, just a weird concept. And obviously it didn't work out. It was a stupid idea. Another game that they also tried launching was Crucible, and they did technically launch this one, but after they launched it, they unlaunched it and they went back into closed beta and then they canceled it. So it doesn't 100% count for this video, but I just wanted to mention it real quick because, I don't know, it's just funny. It's the only game I've ever seen launch and then go back into closed beta. I've never seen it. It has never been done before, I think. So in the late 90s, there was this PlayStation franchise called Legend of Kain, or it was called like Blood Omen Legend of Kain in some regions. And it was like a single player narrative driven game that was like, had like this like gothic art style to it. I don't know. And for a long time, there was no new game. And then in 2013, Square Enix announced a new game that was going to be developed by Psyonix, the Rocket League developer, actually. This game was going to be called Nosgorth. And instead of being a single player game, it was going to be a team-based third-person multiplayer game. And people were like, huh? Why are they making a multiplayer game? There's never been a multiplayer game. Well, apparently, it was a single-player game that was in development. It was canceled, and Psyonix was working on the multiplayer part. And then after the single-player part was canceled, they were just like, maybe we can still release the multiplayer part. So they ran a couple tests that people could get into. And, you know, after that, like many of these games, they decided that it was not going to be a big hit, and they closed the servers. That's kind of the end of this, and I don't think we've heard any new Legacy of Kain type game since then. I think that was a remastered, but nothing like new.
Do you think it'll ever come back?
Is multiplayer game or Legacy of Kain?
I don't know. All of it.
All of it? Maybe. I don't think so, though. I don't even know. Like, I've never met someone who was like, oh, I played Legacy of Kain when I was a kid, or...
Yeah.
I feel like this game was played by someone in 1999 who was already 45 years old. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. That's oddly specific.
No offense to anyone, okay?
Someone's really offended out there. All the Legacy of Kain fans, all three of them are going to come after you.
I'm so sorry.
Speaking of game series that don't have any fans, let's talk about Tom Clancy's The Division.
Oh, you're going to get in even more trouble than me now.
I think it's interesting that not only was there a Tom Clancy's game that was a free-to-play live service game that ended up getting canceled, but there were two Tom Clancy games that were free-to-play live service games that got canceled. Hold on, I want to read you the way that the box art looks. Tom Clancy's The Division Heartland, a Ubisoft original, and Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Frontline, a Ubisoft original. Could they have any more generic names than these two names?
The Ubisoft original has a little bit of a threatening aura.
Yeah. It's definitely not like a seal of like good. I mean, it's so generic. Like, it's not even exciting to talk about. We've talked about these games before. I don't want to like waste everyone's time talking about too much. There was a third person action shooter game that was based on the Division series that was supposed to be a live service game that was originally actually a battle royale mode inside of the Division 2 that Ubisoft was like, what if we make it a spin-off? And then I think they like pivoted a couple of times on what they wanted to do with the gameplay itself. I don't think it stayed a battle royale. I think they were trying to turn it into almost like an extraction shooter, right? Did you play it, Luke?
I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about that. Dim is never getting his account back if I'm going to start talking about NDAs I had to sign.
Yeah, Dim got his Rainbow Six Ubisoft account hacked, and we can't play Rainbow Six with them, and we're still upset about it. So if anyone from Ubisoft's watching this, please stop having support threaten to ban Dim from contacting support and give him his account back, please and thank you. Otherwise, we're going to talk about Luke's experience playing Tom Clancy's The Division Heartland, a Ubisoft original, and he'll break his NDA.
All I can say about it...
I was not invited to the cool playtest, but I have a friend who was. I can't say who it was, but I have a friend who's played it, and I heard that it was ass. On the flip side, there was another game, Ghost Recon Frontline, which was a live service, first-person shooter game, PvP, class-based tactical shooter battle royale. Wait, hold on. Let me read you. I feel like we've talked about this exact situation before in another video. Why is it listed as a first-person, massively multiplayer online PvP, class-based tactical shooter battle royale by Ubisoft? That alone is the red flag. They released the trailer, it got a ton of negative feedback, and then they put the game in an alpha. Ubisoft delayed it indefinitely. There was a confidential closed beta that also happened. Pretty much as soon as that opened up, there was footage leaking online all over the place, and there was a ton of criticism from people being like, this game looks like Call of Duty Warzone. Is it a surprise that in 2022, Ubisoft canceled the project? Not really.
I still have a lot of games left. Should I just do a rapid fire round?
Rapid fire round, let's go.
There's Battle Aces. This was a Tencent funded game, was supposed to be an RTS. There was a closed beta that you could sign up, and it was actually just recently canceled earlier this year.
Oh, darn.
Then there was Supernova by Bandai Namco, another MOBA that was announced around 2015. Beta happened. Game did not capture anyone's attention, so they canceled it.
Rest in peace.
There was Triad Wars, which actually was a direct sequel to Sleeping Dogs, but it was like an online multiplayer spin-off, which is also kind of weird. And there was a closed beta for this as well. And then they canceled the game because it had a lot of negative feedback.
Just give us Sleeping Dogs 2, please.
Then there's Magic Legends, which was announced in 2019 and was going to be a free-to-play RPG like Diablo. And there was a open beta on PC that you could download in the Epic Game Store in 2021. And the game apparently missed the mark. They canceled that one as well. That's kind of it.
I want to bring up a couple things real quick. Let's just say, like, hypothetically, like we could see into the future and we made this video later. There is a chance, there is a world where Marathon by Bungie and Splitgate 2 by those numbers, name of the studio that I can never remember because it's like 4 whole numbers.
And 47.
Yeah, thank you. If those games end up getting canceled, they would have made it onto this list. We just can't see that far into the future. And I feel like while there's no real indication we can go off of that these games are for sure getting canceled, there is like this like at risk. Like, you know how animals go endangered before they go extinct?
Yeah, like the dodo.
Yes, like the dodo. I don't think they're endangered, but they're like right on that like line where you're like, maybe we shouldn't be poaching these animals right now. Like the populations are getting low. And I feel like both Marathon and Splitgate 2 are those games. Like if there's a shakeup, these games are done for. Marathon did a closed alpha and then did like a slightly less closed alpha where like people were able to play it, right?
Yeah, you could sign up through Discord or something.
The game was like mostly criticized for being just kind of like, okay. Definitely not like the big hyped up return. Like, you know, the people that brought you Marathon, Halo, and Destiny bringing you the new next thing. It definitely didn't seem like that. And there was like also some controversy about like asset flipping and like potentially, I don't know the validity of it, so don't quote me on it.
Yeah, they had assets from an artist in it, like a lot of them. And this was like the second or third time Bungie has done it. I think they did it for Destiny 2. Some artists that worked there ripped off some stuff or stole some stuff, and then it was never found in an internal review. I mean, so yeah, I don't know. It just keeps happening, I guess. Also, I was interrogating Dim about his experience with Marathon, and I asked him what was fun about Marathon, and he took the longest pause.
He said, I don't know, I like extraction shooters. That wasn't even Marathon specific. Dim, are you here in the call still muted? What did you like about Marathon?
Combat felt fun.
Well, there you guys have it. The reason why this game still needs to release.
And then Splitgate.
I mean, the game's not going away. Like, you can still play it. There aren't very many games that release and then go back into beta. It only happens a handful of times. It has happened, but not very often. You don't see it every day. I've seen plenty of games that shouldn't release from beta.
I feel like there's more games that should not have released than there's games that should release nowadays, so...
That's true. 100% true. It's a shame, but man, there are way more games that just shouldn't be made than games that should be made. It's like too many people working on games that don't need to be made, where if they would like split up a lot of those teams and like let the teams have more creative freedom to make something really cool, they'd probably be a lot better than a lot of these like corporate machine type games that like Ubisoft spits out.
Yeah, actually, I was about to say, I want to clarify that we're talking about AAA releases, because the indie games, all of them are valid, you know, like if a small team wants to make their vision, I mean, that's totally fine, you know, those can always release, whether they're good or not. But like these big companies wasting millions and millions of dollars on like these bad, boring games, it's just frustrating. I don't know. It just personally offends me, okay?
Right. It's like a game gets popular and then everyone wants to copy it. Like Honkai Star Rail is like a popular game on mobile. And Dim, what was the name of that closed beta we got into that we never even played?
Mongrel.
Mongol, you heard it. Also, I have a confession to make to you guys. I also got in after you guys talked about it, and I was jealous that you guys got in, but I also never played it. So
Mongol Stardive, not Honkai Star Rail, not Hentai Star Rail, Mongol Stardive. So I don't know.
I have to censor hentai.
I don't think you have to censor hentai. Not this late in the video. YouTube changed the rules. We can say no. Wait, don't put it in though. Censor then, just in case. What if YouTube changes the rules back? Let's do a really quick outro. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe if you're watching, especially on TV. That goes a long way. Also, if you want to support us, Patreon, YouTube members, thank you. You guys can support us on there. You get your name here in the credits. Look at that. And YouTube thinks you'll like this video, so watch that. That's all. Okay, bye.